Revealed, 4 surprising fruits to avoid over 60 and 4 amazing superfoods you must eat daily for total wellness. Betty Johnson clutched the newspaper tighter, a wave of unease crashing over her. The bold letters taunted her, as if revealing some terrible family secret. Avoiding certain fruits? In her world, fruits were harmless bites of happiness that complemented the hearty meals she'd mastered over the decades, much to her children's delight. She felt pressure rise in her chest. Could she really carve out a new path at 62 and defy all she ever knew? The thought of altering her meals sent tremors of anxiety coursing through her. How would she even choose? It wasn't just the headlines that loomed over her. It was what lay ahead as her retirement years unraveled. After years of raising 3 children, Betty felt unmoored. Jake, her eldest, was always rushing between meetings, consumed by a lifestyle that left no room for family dinners anymore. She worried about his health, how it suffered under the weight of ambition. The very thought of losing him was unbearable. If she couldn't coax him back to the table, how could she even think of enforcing changes on herself? Her gentle heart ached. Could this be a case of thoughtful evolution or a misguided leap into the unknown? She often dismissed the health supplements he pushed onto her as trendy fads, pills filled with promises that felt like empty calories. Yet the pressure to comply gnawed at her, making her question the comforting traditions that had been the bedrock of their family. Maybe these recipes could be swapped for something more efficient. But they were a part of their history, woven into the fabric of who they were. The certainty of love was bound in each dish. She cooked the repeated relishes and cherished leftovers that kept her family close. She breathed unevenly, scanning the article for anything validating her discomfort, but it all seemed so foreign. There was a deep-rooted love in the spices she used, the labor of chopping and simmering down to the warmth that filled the home. She felt torn, coaxed into a quick-fix culture while her heart clung to something that was close and familiar. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Her inner turmoil bubbled just beneath the surface, and her racing thoughts collided with a palpable sense of determination. Before she could make any decision about her diet, she needed to figure out exactly who she was now. The unexpected emergence of Doris, her eccentric neighbor with a quirky laugh and pearls of wisdom hidden behind her whimsical humor, made things all the more complicated. Betty relished the idea of exploring new recipes, learning to embrace life through a healthier lens, but the haunting fear of Jake's disapproval loomed like fog, obstructing her path. In a moment of clarity, she wondered, what if Jake saw her journey as laughter birthed from petty defiance? What if he saw her newfound zeal for life as a threat rather than inspiration? As the clock ticked, the walls of her world began to constrict. A family dinner was fast approaching, and just thinking about it made her heart pound against her ribs, a tangible pulse of anxiety. Would she stand her ground and risk alienating Jake, or fold under pressure to conform to the status quo that felt suffocating? With every tick, she felt urgency to face her greatest fears. Her heart felt heavy. She was on the precipice of change, yet clung desperately to the edges of her comfort zone. What would happen if she fell? Would she land on a path toward healing or fall deeper into chaos where family love barely survived? Betty took a deep breath, her chest rising and falling with the weight of her decision as she paced her small, sunlit kitchen. The familiar aroma of oregano and garlic danced through her mind, beckoning her to cling to what she knew. Yet, she also felt that tiny stir of excitement. Perhaps it was time to step outside the parameters of her culinary comfort zone. The heaviness of her thoughts mirrored the heavy, worn wooden table that had been the heart of her home, but now it felt less like a sanctuary and more like a battleground. The impending family dinner gnawed at her like a persistent itch she couldn't scratch. Jake would arrive with Michelle, his partner, and Betty wanted this dinner to be different. She envisioned a menu that celebrated both tradition and innovation, but visions can be deceiving. What if her attempt at modernizing their meal was met with disdain? The very idea sent a shiver through her. Each recipe flashed through her mind like an indecisive kaleidoscope: stews mixed with grains, her classic lasagna smothered in fewer calories, yet still bursting with flavor, or even that quinoa salad Doris raved about. The tension built within her as she weighed the pros and cons, each contender seeming to pull her in a different direction. The realization struck. Her culinary choices were less about food and more about identity. With every chop of the knife, Betty felt an internal struggle. Would these changes signify growth or an abandonment of her roots? She paused, staring at the green onions in her hand, their crispness a sharp contrast to her muddled thoughts. They could symbolize revitalization, the newness she craved if only she had the courage to let them shine on a plate alongside her beloved baked ziti. She carefully considered her options. Memories flooded back: Jake at 7, laughing with sauce smeared from ear to ear, or the way her late husband always claimed he could taste love in her chicken pot pie. If they could strategically intertwine old memories with new traditions, perhaps she wouldn't be relegating her past to the shadows, and perhaps Jake could see her growth as an extension of their family's love rather than a rejection of it. But the nagging doubt resurfaced again. What if she really was alone in this venture? Preparing every dish meticulously was one thing. It was another to do it for an audience that may not appreciate the effort she poured into her food. The thought of Jake's raised brow and disapproval stung more than she wanted to admit. She knew she needed to break this cycle, but the idea of venturing alone into uncharted waters left a bitter taste in her heart. "Do it for yourself," she whispered to her reflection in the kitchen window. She could reshape her identity not as a mother defined by her children's approval, but as Betty, a woman willing to evolve. She grabbed a notebook, flipping to a new page, resolutely drafting a simple plan. Each meal would be a blend of heritage and modernity, a subtle invitation to her family to join her exploration rather than a proclamation of her intended transformation. With fresh determination, Betty eagerly jotted down her intended menu. Then, with a flutter of hope, she called Doris, wanting input, support, confirmation that she wasn't losing her grip on who she had been. But would Doris' perspective advocate for her chance to thrive? Would the outside approval she sought be a balm to her subconscious fears, or would she need to face those voices within her head alone? The clock ticked, and with every second that passed, Betty felt a shiver of expectation rise in her heart. She needed reassurance, but more than that, she wanted to break free from the chains of surface-level judgment. The time had come to confront her instinct, to embrace vulnerability before a family the way it always should have been, full of love, laughter, and yes, even a touch of uncertainty. What awaited her during dinner? The warmth of acceptance or the chill of reproach? As she set her phone down, a renewed sense of purpose filled her. But then again, deep down, she questioned, would courage alone be enough to bridge the gap formed over years of beloved routines? Betty stared at her notebook, the blank page still waiting for the words that could bridge the chasm separating her from vital change. She felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The once comforting ritual of cooking had morphed into a source of conflict, and with each passing moment, she realized the magnitude of her undertaking. Her kitchen had long been a domain of simple, satisfying meals, but now it felt as though she was attempting to recalibrate the very heartbeat of her family. That evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, her fingers drummed lightly against the paper. The dishes she had chosen swirled in her mind. She envisioned guests seated nearby, eager to taste her latest creations, yet anxiety gnawed at her. What if they rejected her efforts? The thought was distressing. She needed to shift her mindset away from fear and toward possibility. She closed her eyes for a fleeting moment, grounding herself in the warm memories that filled her heart. The way Jake had once danced around the kitchen as a child, the way her husband had playfully critiqued her spices, each moment a reminder that food had always been an expression of love. Yet, the notion of transformation hovered like a specter, urging her to risk discomfort for growth. Could she really redefine herself, not just as a caretaker, but as a culinary creator? After a long pause, Betty opened her eyes and focused on her menu. She recognized that cooking was a language of its own, a way to communicate, to share stories. She could control which stories were told through her dishes, weaving together the old and new recipes. But as she scribbled ideas, a sense of urgency washed over her. How could she ensure that her family was receptive to her culinary experimentations? They had always consumed her food with love, but might have been less receptive to unfamiliar tastes. Suddenly, an idea burst forth. She remembered the stories Doris had shared during their conversations, tales of her own culinary evolution. What if she invited Doris to help her prepare the dinner? A shared experience could transform the dinner into a celebration of unity rather than merely her unilateral endeavor. The idea was exhilarating, and yet it revived her doubts. Would Doris's presence overshadow Betty's own exploration, or could it become an empowering collaboration? With a renewed purpose, Betty dialed Doris's number. "Could I use your expertise for a dinner I'm planning?" she asked. "I'd love your insight." As she waited for the response, she felt a swell of hope emerge. This wasn't just about finding acceptance. It was about aligning her past with her present, reinventing the legacy of her cooking. When Doris agreed, a wave of relief washed over her. Suddenly, cooking felt manageable. It wasn't just about her anymore, but a shared project flavored with camaraderie. This partnership could deliver strength against her insecurities. They would cook together, test flavors together, infuse love into every dish as collaborators instead of opponents. The evening wore on, and preparations began to take shape in her mind. As each detail fell into place, Betty felt a surge of confidence that she hadn't anticipated. Stepping into this new culinary territory seemed less daunting with support at her side. Yet, lingering questions swirled within her. Would her family appreciate the shift? How would they react to the lessons and flavors from Doris's experience? Seated again at the table, Betty reflected on her journey. The juxtaposition of fear and empowerment was eerily beautiful. The stakes felt higher this time, but so did her expectations for herself. Tomorrow was mere hours away. The time had come to face not only her family, but her own hesitations. As she settled into her thoughts, anticipation thrummed through her veins. Did she have what it took to execute her vision with grace? Or would the old ghosts of her culinary past emerge to haunt her? Whatever awaited, she knew she was no longer moving forward alone. The door to change was beginning to creak open, but once inside, would she find a welcome or a barrier? With the clock ticking down to dinner, one question loomed larger than the rest. What hidden challenges, perhaps even revelations, were waiting just beyond that threshold? The morning sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting a warm glow on the countertops, as Betty prepared for her collaboration with Doris. Today would be more than just about cooking. It marked a pivotal turning point in her culinary journey. Each step she took in the familiar space now had a newfound energy pulsating through it. The ingredients she assembled were not just vegetables and spices. They were potential stories waiting to be told. She moved through her routine with purpose, yet underneath her resolve, bubbling uncertainty lingered. Would each dish not only reflect her creativity, but also affirm her capability? Harnessing a burst of energy, she began pulling out containers and arranging her tools, each movement intended to dispel the doubts knotting in her chest. Betty couldn't shake the question lurking at the edges of her mind. What if her family preferred the old ways? The comfort foods of her past loomed like shadows, familiar yet suffocating. Steadying her breath, she leaned into the thought instead of resisting it. What if they didn't simply want familiarity? What if they craved something new, a leap toward culinary adventure? As the clock inched closer to Doris's arrival time, Betty steeled herself, embracing the discomfort of potential rejection. The morning coffee sat untouched, an ignored reminder of a ritual once important. Today was about pushing beyond her limits, not sitting comfortably within them. When Doris eventually arrived, she brought an aura of enthusiasm that filled the room. The air shifted, charged with possibility. Betty noted how Doris entered effortlessly, exuding a confidence that Betty longed to possess. The elder woman surveyed the spread, her eyes glimmering with approval. They exchanged greetings, and almost instantly, they fell into a rhythm, as if they had been working together for years. "Let us start with that risotto you mentioned," Doris suggested, her tone both authoritative and inviting. Betty nodded, stepping aside momentarily to allow her mentor to take the lead. As Doris demonstrated the delicate process, Betty found herself captivated not just by the cooking techniques, but by the ease with which Doris navigated the kitchen. Memories of her own hesitations flashed before her, but this time felt different. With each grain of rice Doris stirred with precision, Betty felt remnants of her old self slipping away. It was as if the collaboration forged a new identity, a version of her that embraced vulnerability and possibility. When the moment came for Betty to contribute her own twist, a touch of lemon zest and fresh herbs, she hesitated. The fear of failure prickled at her, but she inhaled deeply, focusing instead on the joy of creating. "Trust your instincts, Betty," Doris encouraged, her eyes inviting confidence. "Cooking is as much about intuition as it is about technique." Bolstered by this affirmation, Betty flicked the zest across the creamy mixture. The smell exploded wonderfully, potent and vibrant, and with it came an exhilarating sense of empowerment. She was not just learning from Doris. She was beginning to reclaim her identity as a creator, a cook who dared to innovate. As the day continued to unfold, they moved seamlessly from dish to dish, laughter rippling through the air. Betty found herself losing track of time, the kitchen transforming into a vibrant theater of colors, sounds, and smells. Yet, as time passed, doubt crept back through the door. Was her family ready for these experiments? Would they truly embrace the flavors and techniques that were emerging from this radical shift? As Betty plated their first dish, a fusion of old and new that shimmered with artistry, she hesitated once more. Trusting her instincts felt risky, an act of standing on the precipice of change. Her heart thudded heavily as she contemplated her family's potential reaction. Would they be receptive to the culinary story she was weaving? Or would they struggle to understand the new language she was attempting to speak? With uncertainty swirling, she finally lifted her head, locking eyes with Doris. This was no longer just about dinner. It was about Betty's evolution, the embodiment of her desire to forge a new path. Standing at this intersection of fear and potential, she could either retreat or leap forward. But then again, she considered, what if she approached the evening not as a test of acceptance, but as an invitation to experience growth together, family and food intertwining harmoniously? With her resolve hardening, Betty faced the mirror-like surface of their beautifully plated dish, and she could almost hear her family's voices in the back of her mind, echoing her thoughts of acceptance. As the door approached, and dinner time loomed ever closer, one last thought flickered through her mind. Tonight could very well ignite the spark of their collective culinary adventure or douse her aspirations once more. What awaited beyond the door? Would her family embrace the story of transformation she was so desperately hoping to share, or would they prefer the well-trodden path of familiarity? The answer loomed large, her curiosity intertwining with trepidation, setting the stage for a thrilling confrontation with the taste of ambition and love. The door creaked open, and there stood her family, a mix of apprehension and curiosity on their faces. Betty felt her heart race as she greeted them, her careful composure faltering for a brief moment. She could sense the weight of expectation, a silent demand for reassurance in the eyes of her husband and her children. Their first glimpse of the vibrant dishes created in collaboration with Doris emerged like a confession of her new path, daring them to react. "Wow, what did you do here?" her husband asked, peering at the colorful plates. He looked intrigued, yet uncertain. "It's a new take on dinner," Betty replied, striving for nonchalance, although inside, her voice trembled with the fear of judgment. She gestured them to the table, but every step felt heavier, a reminder of the responsibility weighing down on her shoulders. Sitting down, they examined the fusion of flavors and colors that Betty had once only imagined. The medley embodied her journey of transformation, not just as a cook, but as an individual ready to stake a claim in the world of culinary artistry. But would they appreciate her effort, or reject it outright in favor of the familiar? As they began to taste, silence descended upon the table. Each bite seemed to elongate into what felt like an eternity, every taste met with scrunched brows or pensive chews. Betty's stomach twisted with anxiety. The vibrancy she had embraced in the kitchen now felt a double-edged sword. Had she leaped too far? Was she losing her family in pursuit of something grander than what they desired? "Interesting," her daughter finally said, her face expressing thoughtfulness rather than disapproval. "It's different but good." Relief flooded through Betty, yet she remained acutely aware that different lingered in the air, teetering dangerously close to unfamiliar. She pondered her daughter's comment, interpreting it as a challenge. Was she daring the family to reevaluate what they had always known and loved? Would they be willing to embrace change or view it as an affront to the comfortable rituals they had established over the years? Doris, who was quietly observing from the edge of the table, leaned in. It's all about the experience of flavors. Food should tell a story, connect us, and open a dialogue. She articulated with a fierceness that resonated deeply with Betty's craving for acceptance. Do you think we can explore this different way of cooking more often? Betty finally asked, her voice steadying, revealing the slow build of her newfound confidence. The question hung in the air, punctuated by the quiet crunch of what remained on their plates. Each family member exchanged looks, eyes flickering between surprise and intrigue. In that moment, she realized they were in the midst of an unplanned, pivotal conversation. Her husband nodded slowly, as if weighing his words. I think it's time for us to be open to trying new things. As long as you don't throw away my meatloaf, he said, flicking a playful grin in her direction, prompting laughter to spill into the room. As they began to talk, dissecting flavors, sensations, and the memories each bite evoked, Betty felt a sense of blossoming connection around the table. This was more than just about food. This was about cultivating relationships, about merging the past and the future, old and new. Betty's doubts began to fade, exposed by the light of their shared experiences, illuminating the path ahead. As the evening drew to a close, she felt a lightness that had eluded her for years. This had been a step towards mutual discovery and exploration of culinary horizons that promised so much more than just dinner. Yet deep within her, lingering questions stirred anew. How far could she push this narrative of change? What would it mean if she embraced her evolving identity fully, inviting her family to join her in the unexpected and the bold, challenging the very roots of their culinary history? As dusk settled outside, casting shadows across their joyful faces, one truth crystallized in Betty's mind. The true challenge was not merely about creating new flavors, it was about reshaping traditions. And as she gazed at her family immersed in lively banter, she wondered, was she ready to take the next step, to delve deeper into this culinary adventure she had begun? Beyond flavors and textures lay the essence of connection, the promise of discovery, and she couldn't help but wonder what new culinary stories awaited her and her family in the days to come. The journey had only just begun, and an uncharted territory beckoned. Yet, would she risk everything to steer them toward a future painted in vibrant new hues, exploring together what had remained untested for far too long? The next day, as sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, painting the room in warm hues, Betty felt an unfamiliar energy coursing through her. The conversation from the previous night hung in the air, infused with a mix of budding expectation and trepidation. She stood at the counter, contemplating her next move in this culinary odyssey and reflecting on her newfound conviction. Was she truly prepared to venture further along this path that had begun to unfold so vibrantly? Doris's words echoed in her mind, urging her to consider food not just as sustenance, but as an expression of identity and connectivity. Today would mark a fresh beginning. Determined to embrace this philosophy, Betty decided to explore a new vegetable dish unlike any they'd tried before. It needed a twist, something that would capture her family's imaginations while also igniting their taste buds. She rummaged through her pantry, filled with ingredients she had once overlooked. Did she dare purchase a vegetable that would likely raise eyebrows? Betty's heart raced as she reached for a small package of lotus root. It was new, it was unique, and most importantly, it had the potential for that daring twist she craved. But the very thought of her family's judgment hovered like a specter. Would they embrace this leap into the unknown? No longer willing to falter, she loaded up her cart with other ingredients, determined to weave them together into something extraordinary. The market felt different today, alive with possibilities. Each stall showcasing vibrant fruits and vegetables whispered stories of different cultures, and for the first time, Betty felt like an explorer in search of treasures. She envisioned a dish that celebrated textures and colors, each element complementing the other. The openness of her family from the night before encouraged her to bring this idea to life. If they could appreciate her culinary leap, maybe they would be willing to dive deeper into her evolving vision. Yet, the uncertainty about their reactions loomed large in her mind. Later that evening, After a whirlwind of chopping, sautéing, and seasoning, the kitchen was filled with enticing aromas. There, on the counter, stood an array of dishes, each color more striking than the last, culminating in the lotus root stir-fry, glazed in a tangy sauce that shimmered invitingly. Betty stepped back, surveying her creations, a mosaic of culinary creativity that felt authentic to her new self. Gathering her family, she felt a rush of energy, excitement intertwined with fear. She shared her thought process, explaining the inspiration behind each dish and how they represented her journey. As she spoke, she tuned into her own hesitations and the necessity for this open dialogue. Did they hear her? Did they understand the stakes she had placed on their dinner table? Okay, let us see how adventurous we really are. Her husband chuckled good-naturedly, raising an eyebrow. He took a cautious bite of the lotus root. The silence that followed was both encouraging and testing. Would they appreciate her discovery, or would it clash with their ingrained preferences? One by one, her family tasted the dishes, and her heart raced with every reaction. Her daughter's eyes widened in surprise at the crunch and tanginess of the lotus root, followed by her son declaring it a new favorite. Laughter and conversation flowed as they began to weave their own stories around each bite, connecting it back to memories and dreams. In that moment, the cultural tapestry of their meal became a gateway to earning mutual respect and understanding. Yet beneath the surface, the echoes of their traditional meals whispered doubts back at her. Could she sustain this sense of adventure? Would she be able to consistently lead her family into this realm of culinary exploration? Feeling that familiar swell of self-doubt, Betty pondered the real challenge ahead. While her family might have accepted these changes today, tomorrow could feel like a different story. It was one thing to relish in a moment of acceptance. It was an entirely different challenge to cultivate that same enthusiasm for change over time. Their evening concluded with laughter and storytelling. She recognized the evolving dynamic of their relationship not just with food, but collectively as a family grappling with change and tradition. The reality of navigating both realms coexisted, compelling her to push boundaries and assert her identity. Betty realized she was at a crossroads. Beyond the palate lay the elaborate task of shifting perceptions and attitudes. What if her culinary evolution went beyond her family's tastes, challenging not just their flavors, but their conceptions of family meals? Would they accept her vision, or cling to the dishes that offered comfort and familiarity? With a new spark igniting in her, she stood before them, poised for the next challenge. What awaited her in this personal evolution? The push to explore further came with its own set of uncertainties, shadowed by the possibility of resistance. But a desire for authenticity throbbed in her veins, demanding progression without retreat. As she locked eyes with her family, she could already feel the new narrative unfolding. The question weighed heavily. Would she be able to strike a balance between tradition and experimentation, leading them gracefully into this unfamiliar culinary landscape? When morning broke, the soft light spilling into the kitchen illuminated the aftermath of last night's culinary adventure. Betty stood before her counter, a canvas of colorful remnants, gnarled scraps of lotus root, and vibrant vegetable peels lying scattered. The enticing aromas still lingered, wrapping around her like a warm hug. But her initial exhilaration was tempered with a stab of introspection. While her family had received her experimental dinner with warmth and open minds, Betty felt a flood of uncertainty. How could she shake off the lingering doubts about whether last night's excitement was a one-off? It had been exhilarating to break through to her family, but could she sustain this newfound enthusiasm? The pressure to create a routine of adventurous meals loomed overhead. She began to question the integrity of her desire to forge a new path in their culinary traditions. Would they rally around her ambitions or retreat to safely nostalgic dishes? A gnawing anxiety twisted in her stomach as she poured herself a cup of coffee, its bitterness stark against the sweetness of last night's joy. Betty steeled herself. She could not allow self-doubt to tether her back to complacency. With determination flickering like a candle in the wind, she decided to draw on the catalog of flavors she had recently explored. Trying new recipes was a challenge, but she could also influence her environment, buying inspiration, something she had overlooked during years of routine. Turning on her computer, she began to sift through culinary blogs and recipe sites. The vibrant images sparked her imagination as she focused on crafting a weekly meal plan filled with new, bold dishes. Her heart raced in anticipation. Once again, she would delve into uncharted territory. The act of planning felt almost like a declaration of freedom, a manifesto for their kitchen expedition. But with that exhilaration came the stark reminder of how deeply rooted habits die hard. Would her family be willing to embrace this shift after a few days, or would they start to push back against her innovations, clinging to the comforts of familiarity? The thought of failed attempts or their disappointment hung over her, but she pressed on, focusing on how these new flavors could connect them. Throughout the week, she introduced each dish with enthusiasm, sharing the stories behind her choices. When she served her take on Thai basil stir-fry, she likened the bursting flavors to a celebration of their family's own journeys, bitter, sweet, and sometimes a tad spicy. Her husband leaned in, intrigued as he sampled her latest creation, his gestures enthusiastic, encouraging her efforts. Still, her fears crawled in the periphery. Each successful dinner was a revelation, granting her the satisfaction of newfound culinary skills, but the discomfort nagged at the back of her mind. Would resistance rise when sated appetites grew weary of novelty? As laughter filled the air, it was accompanied by a tantalizing worry. Could she keep their interest alive? Sneaking glances at her family as they savored these new meals painted a complex picture. While initially resounding with curious enjoyment, she noticed subtle changes, a slight hesitance, an eyebrow raised when encountering an unfamiliar ingredient. It was a double-edged sword. She had ignited their palates, but now had to maintain the flame of curiosity. As another dinner drew to a close, Betty found herself at a crossroads again, one foot anchored in her family's comfort zone, the other hovering over the precipice of her growing aspirations. The thrill of her journey coexisted with the real and looming fear of disappointment, not just for herself, but for her family too. Taking a deep breath, she realized it was crucial to create dialogue around their experiences, not just to showcase her culinary creations, but to engage her family in a conversation that pushed past their initial reactions. The importance of communication was glaringly apparent. Instead of merely presenting her evolving vision, she needed to invite her family into the creative process. Would they be willing to participate? Would they help her choose the next ingredients or flavors to explore? The idea felt revolutionary, transforming her culinary journey into a communal experience rather than one solely shaped by her whims. Determined, Betty gathered them once more. The table was set, but the topic was her plan for the future, a family decision on the menu. As her family listened, she felt an electrifying blend of hope and anticipation. In a moment that hung in the air, she proposed an idea. How about we make this fun? Why don't we create a weekly recipe challenge, and we each pick something new to make? We can experiment together. She watched closely as the invitation unfolded. Now it was time to see if the flame she had ignited would burn steadily or flicker and fade. Would her family embrace this shared adventure, or recoil at the commitment it required? And could their new narrative evolve into something sustainable, more than just a phase of experimentation? The moment hung delicately, brimming with potential. This was her call to action, a step toward redefining not just their palates, but their family dynamics. What awaited them now? Would this collective venture unite them in a lasting pursuit, or challenge the very essence of their familial ties? Silence pressed down on the table, thick with anticipation. Betty could see the wheels turning in her family's minds. Her husband, Matt, scratched his chin thoughtfully, while her son, Lucas, glanced at his sister, Emma, both trying to gauge the reception of the idea. Betty's heart raced as she fought the urge to second-guess herself. This was an opportunity for dialogue and collaboration, a way to plant deeper roots for her culinary exploration in their family tree. "Are you all in?" she asked lightly, lacing her voice with a playful tone to ease the tension that had settled. With this prompt, the walls of uncertainty began to crack. Lucas was the first to speak up, enthusiasm sparking in his otherwise reticent demeanor. "Yeah, I want to make something cool. How about sushi?" "I'm not sure we know the first thing about sushi, but it sounds adventurous," Betty replied, a glimmer of excitement brightening her eyes. Emma chimed in with bright conviction. "Can I try to bake? A cake with surprise ingredients? What about a veggie cake?" "Why not?" Matt added, his smile broadening. "A weekly challenge sounds like a great way to connect." It could turn into a fun family night. With that, the dam broke. Their bubbling ideas filled the room, textures and tastes leaping around the table like confetti. The warmth of collaboration washed over her, affirming that her family was willing to embark upon this culinary journey with her. But as the idea took root, another familiar chill coiled around her heart. Could she handle not just her own expectations, but those of her family too? The thought rattled through her mind. Each week would require mental agility, creativity, and the willingness to adjust to feedback, something that, in the past, she was still learning to navigate. The next morning, Betty found herself at her kitchen counter once more, this time staking claim on the environment she had long let slip under the weight of routine. As she prepped for the upcoming week, tossing out half-hearted recipes and drawing blueprints of creativity dotted with her family's newfound input, the kitchen transformed into a war room of possibilities. With every chop of the knife, she envisioned a dish where fresh ingredients could tell stories. Thai basil stir-fry would evolve with Lucas's sushi ideas, while Emma's majority veggie cake became a delightful surprise dessert at the end of a vibrant meal. Yet, there was still a nagging voice questioning whether she could also share her culinary expertise and lead her family through these new adventures in an authentic way. Stepping away from the cutting board, Betty took a breath. This journey was not just a culinary challenge. It had become a chance to redefine her relationships. Yet, the lingering doubt seeped back into the cracks, reminding her of past moments of failure, kitchen disasters, and heavily criticized meals. Would she falter under the pressure of making everyone happy? Or would she indeed transcend these fears and deepen the bonds with her family? As the first family cooking night approached, she could feel the vibrancy of anticipation, but also the sting of expectations, hers and those of her family. After multiplying her recipes, she introduced the idea of team cooking. She could delegate tasks, allowing each family member to contribute while managing her roles and responsibilities as the facilitator. This balancing act loomed larger than she imagined. Could she remain encouraging during inevitable hiccups and celebrate the little victories? The prospect excited her, yet with a gripping anxiety in her gut. As the sun dipped below the horizon, she gathered her family once more. The question now lay ahead of them: would they find unity and joy in their newfound culinary exploration, or would challenges expose fractures within their dynamic? The atmosphere throbbed with tension, laden with hidden potential for both success and consequences. The arrival of the first cooking challenge neared, and with it the reality of each family member's expectations to juggle. Would she sink under the pressure or rise? As a leader capable of harmonizing their distinct ambitions into a flavorful family tapestry? The kitchen felt electric, and Betty knew that soon enough, every decision made would either bind them together or challenge them in unforeseen ways. What awaited them in the crucible of culinary challenges? Would the newfound collaborative spirit ignite sustained passion, or would it reveal discordant notes in their family harmony? Betty awoke to the soft light filtering through the kitchen window, casting gentle shadows over the countertops. Today marked the beginning of their culinary adventure, a family challenge neither she nor her family could fully grasp yet. As she brewed a strong cup of coffee, the aroma wafted around her, stirring a cascade of emotions. Anticipation blended with anxiety, creating an almost electric atmosphere in the air, thick with possibility. She leaned against the counter, her thoughts bouncing between excitement and an apprehension that pressed down like a weight. What if someone lost interest midway? What if she implemented tasks that were too complicated? Would the family bond grow stronger, or would culinary discord find its way into their kitchen? Each scenario danced in her mind, beckoning her to visualize both failures and successes. In an effort to alleviate the feeling of overwhelming expectations, she began jotting down clear, manageable roles for the upcoming night. Lucas would be in charge of ingredient preparation, his nimble fingers adept at washing and chopping, as Emma took the helm on the baking front. It struck her suddenly that their capabilities together could yield a more fulfilling experience than she had ever realized. Each task she assigned felt like a thread weaving into a larger family tapestry, her leadership role shifting from that of solitary chef to captain of a small culinary crew. Realizing she could facilitate creativity instead of imposing her rigid expectations was a revelation that lit a spark in her. There was beauty in collaboration, and she felt inexplicably closer to her family just through this shared endeavor. But a voice in her mind whispered boos of uncertainty. Despite assigning tasks, the actual execution still loomed ahead like an approaching storm. Would her instinct to guide and nurture transform into domineering control? Quick flashes of memories appeared, a scowl from Lucas when he didn't correctly measure a cup of flour, Emma's defeated sigh when her cake collapsed in the past, all asserting themselves, demanding recognition. As evening descended, she found herself standing on the threshold of the kitchen, the buzz of life around her. The family's laughter echoed through the once quiet space, and it was intoxicating. As they gathered, she watched them join forces, excited chatter blending with the clinking of plates and utensils. Each smile propelled a thrill through her, a reminder that family moments could be both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Soon, they convened around the counter like eager artists ready to begin painting their masterpiece. Betty watched as Lucas engaged with the sushi ingredients excitedly, his earlier reticence erased by interest, while Emma measured out her surprise veggie cake components with a newfound determination. In their faces, she saw what she had hoped for: engagement and anticipation, their eyes alight with the thrill of creating together. Yet, as she poured their flour mixture into the mixing bowl, the old doubts crept silently in, once more, tangible and suffocating. Could she really maintain this environment while fostering a sense of accomplishment for each family member? What if the cake failed? Or worse, what if a kitchen mishap alienated them from one another? Betty took a deep breath, culling her nerves in the face of uncertainty. She needed to stay vigilant, to lead with compassion without crossing the line into frustration. Could she learn to celebrate the hiccups instead of seeing them as failures? As the first batch of sushi rolled out and Emma prepared for the oven, the kitchen became a whirlwind of flavors and sensations. Laughter filled the air, camaraderie grew stronger in real time. The blend of nervousness and excitement danced together as each family member shared their triumphs and mishaps while Betty gathered the threads of their interactions, ensuring no moment of annoyance overshadowed the triumphs. But as the final dish departed the oven golden brown and tantalizing, an unsettled feeling twisted in her stomach. Had she truly succeeded, or was she merely delaying confrontation with her own insecurities? The clock ticked, and time neared for tasting their creations. Would the risk of disappointment yield lessons worth learning, or would unity crumble under the strain of flavor and feedback? As they prepared to take the first bite, Betty held her breath, bringing them to the precipice of what could either strengthen their bonds or fracture them irreparably. What awaited them in that moment of truth? The applause of success, or the echo of unmet expectations? The clinking of forks against plates filled the kitchen, each sound echoing Betty's mixed emotions as she watched her family dig into the dishes they had created together. This was at a culmination of her journey, which began as trepidation and blossomed into exhilarating experimentation. Lucas was the first to break the silence. "This sushi is really good. I mean, I didn't think I'd enjoy it, but it has a nice kick." His bold declaration was music to Betty's ears, confirming that their culinary leap was valued. Emma chimed in next, her face lighting up with delight. "And this veggie cake is so moist. How did you make it, Mom?" Betty's heart swelled with pride, swelling at the realization that when the family came together with intention, magic could happen. Each member was contributing something unique, blending tradition with boldness, just as she envisioned. This wasn't just a meal. It was a manifesto of their bond, a discourse wrapped in flavors, textures, and shared adventure. Taking a moment to relish the energy wrapping around her, Betty couldn't resist joining in. "I added a touch of ginger to the sushi. It helps bring out the flavors a bit more." Then, she turned to her husband. "What do you think of the dish we made?" With hope bubbling at the surface, she awaited his feedback, knowing he would take careful consideration before responding. That he nodded thoughtfully, taking a moment to reflect. "Honestly, I didn't think I'd be as convinced about this whole new recipes thing. But I can say that I like how everyone is involved. It makes it more fun." Betty's spirit soared. Here it was validation not only of her culinary choices, but also of the familial connections she had yearned to cultivate. As the laughter and conversation flowed freely, she recognized this transformation was not merely in the food itself, but in how they approached meals and their significance within the family. They were sharing stories, learning together, and embracing the blend of flavors as a catalyst for new traditions. Yet, as the initial thrill waned into a warm contentment, a cognition nestled in the back of her thoughts. The comforting cocoon that wrapped around them this evening would not guarantee the same dynamic tomorrow. Change demanded consistency and navigation. There would be challenges ahead, new recipes to test, and plenty of apprehensions to strap down. Feeling the weight of her commitment, Betty decided that it was essential to keep the dialogue alive. She had seen how much her family relished their involvement tonight, and now it was about sustaining that openness. The following day, she called the family to gather once more at the kitchen table. "I want us to make this a weekly affair, not just a one-time celebration," she said, her voice steady and filled with determination. "But it demands all of us to stay engaged, to try new things, and perhaps even accept our occasional flops with grace." Hesitation flickered across their faces for a moment, but Betty pressed on with a smile. "Change isn't easy, but we'll do it together. Each week, we can pick a theme or cuisine from different cultures. Who knows? We might discover new favorites along the way." As their eyes lit up with renewed excitement, a string of discussions erupted about potential themes: French pastries, spicy Mexican dishes, or even hearty Italian meals. Each suggestion reinforced their connection, a collective pulse of ideas in symbiosis with the culinary experiences they were building. By nurturing this nourishing environment, Betty's role as a leader transformed as well. No longer was she just shaping the food on the table. She was weaving together a narrative of shared experiences that transcended the kitchen. As ideas flowed, she embraced her position not just as a mother, but as a culinary pioneer who inspired collaboration and exploration. And it was in that moment that she understood. Her own transformation had become a pathway for her family to follow. Through her pursuit of a new culinary identity, she had unlocked the door to meaningful interactions beyond the sustenance. They were now an ongoing journey into understanding one another on deeper levels than ever before. With each recipe attempted, each flavor tested, Betty felt a sense of achievement swelling within her, an affirmation that this endeavor was not merely about personal challenge, but about redefining her family's narrative, one meal at a time. As laughter erupted around the table, a buoyant sensation surged in her, a celebration of connection that she would continue to cultivate. Indeed, this would be the joyful heart of her home, the taste of love, seasoned with adventure. Betty's culinary odyssey was far from over, but she felt profound fulfillment standing at the helm. With a renewed sense of confidence, she had finally proven to herself and her family that embracing change brings not just challenges, but also growth, laughter, and an endless remix of flavors worth experiencing together. Now, she was bold enough to face whatever new opportunities awaited, confident in her ability to not just lead, but to forge the vibrant family culture she had once dreamed of. The heart of her kitchen had transformed, echoing the mosaic of their evolving stories, and she couldn't be more proud of the journey that awaited them as they enjoyed the remnants of their first cooking night. Knowing that every flavor served would be laced with intention, Betty realized her story belonged not just to her anymore. It was now interwoven with her whole family, promising an expedition of taste and togetherness that they would surely savor long into the future. Don't miss out on more exclusive emotional stories like this. You need to subscribe now to ensure you're part of our journey of personal growth. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help spread these impactful narratives. Comment your thoughts and insights about this transformation, and share your own culinary tales. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who crave inspiration to embark on their own journey of overcoming and growth. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.